Usually those who participate as victims in large um, situations of destructions, usually those are higher souls with a sprinkling of intermediate and lower souls.
That's why they have such a powerful masses.
Yes.
Okay, say that again. The ones that operate as victims?
Yes. Usually are higher souls.
So like Saddam Hussein might have been a higher.
No, no, no. He's not a victim. He's not a victim. He's a perpetrator.
Okay.
Okay. Now listen to what I said.
Okay.
Listen to what I said. I said, in general, are higher souls with a sprinkling of intermediate and lower souls. So you've got some of everybody in there because you have the larger mass teaching, the lower learning. Some learning and some just being recalled because they've gone too far against what they came here to do and just flat out being said, no, Jack, you got to come back, you see. So there is a sprinkling of things. You will find that in World War II. You find it in World War I, in all the great world wars. In any situation where you have large numbers of people dying, the lesson is being taught, the expression of certain energies is happening, so that everything can rise. That is the dynamics of life. Wait a minute. Go ahead.
The black people that came from Africa had developed a center for having been there, and developed a culture, and I mean the culture was very broad, developed a center, and at a point, as a whole, they were brought over, stripped of everything, brought over here, and it always sort of felt like they were the big brother teaching the little brother
That is
about how to behave, because the white folks is acting real stupid, and it's like people sacrificing their lives to teach another race of people. Not that.
That is so. That is so. But by the same token, it's like everything else. There are whites. See, that's a cooperation. There are whites who say, all right, all that racism and crap is crap, all right, who are in cooperation with these souls. But see, now you're talking about, what you have to really understand is you're talking about, when you're talking about white and black, you're talking about the clothing that people wear. The spirits are just spirit. They just lined up in certain ways in order to do a certain thing. It's like the NFL. It's like, or the, what do you call that? What do you call that? American League. Okay. You call the whole thing the National Baseball League or whatever. Let's say it's more like that. You see, at any point in time when a certain thing has happened, any player can change teams. He just puts on a different uniform. You see? So, yes, what you say is so. But there's cooperations on many levels of that in order to teach and to broaden something. You see, something had to happen. You had two peoples who came out of different environments, and the different environments carried with it certain characteristics. You had people coming out of Europe with colder attitudes because the climate was harsh. All right? So one of the things you had was heavy meat eating because other stuff wouldn't grow. You know, it's winter. It's a harsh winter. So you had a different attitude develop. Now you had a guy coming up in this hot climate where shit grew all the time. You had less meat eating because there was less of a need.
They could say, don't eat pork.
They could say don't eat pork. They could say eat very little meat.
Yeah.
All right? They could, when we're talking about meat eating, we're talking about aggression.
Okay.
Not the meat itself. The meat doesn't matter. It's the aggression.
Okay.
All right? So people coming out of a cold climate always have to be aggressive because the climate is harsh. But now you had people coming out of a warm climate whose level of aggression was, see, you got one level of aggression here, you got one level of aggression here, when the medium is somewhere in here. So you have to get those to come together to work it out for the proper spot, or the happy medium, or the what is the word? Optimum. Who said optimum? Yeah, for the optimum, right? That works it out. If you notice, if you go back, you have to notice the difference in the structures. All right. Now we're just talking about some things that have happened. All right. And we're talking about what you have to dismiss from yourself is racial things. I'm this, I'm good, or biases. I don't mean that. They are biases, but I want you to look at something at a different level. If you look at the two people coming out of Europe, because they were meat eaters, aggressive, their bodies, the bone structure was bigger. All right? People coming out of Africa, their bone structures in general were smaller, quicker. They had large gluteus, long tendons, because they had to get away from shit quick. You know, I mean, you don't get away from a lion by running long distance. You have to get up and move quickly now. See, in coming out of Europe, you could have stamina, because there wasn't too many things there that was going to catch you, you see. Body structures were different. The bone structure was bigger. Now, let's look at what happened. By bringing blacks to America to work the fields, they were the only ones who were suited. The only one who had the strength to work in the hot climates. If you notice, slavery was in the southern states where it was hot. Well, they tried it with the Chinese. It didn't work too good. I mean, they were like falling over dead. You know, they weren't accustomed to that. So there was a strength in this black person. But now, here comes the underlying thing. When the masters began to sleep with the black women and produce children. Now you had a person who had a small bone structure and a person who had a large bone structure coming up with a hybrid. If you look in athletics, you see a domination. But what you see is a domination by something that's neither of the original. You see? You had this big bone structure now coming to bear with these quick twitch fibers that got away from the lions and shit, and all of a sudden you got a 6'5", 250-pound something that said, "Hi, little fella," and he's talking to everybody, and he's something the likes of which nobody has seen before. Everybody goes, "Damn, jeez," because he isn't either anymore. Now, what does this say? It makes a statement to the rest of the world. If you unify, you can become better than either of you were separately. That is the message. And yes, but it is a cooperation. And again, I don't mean this thing. See, I don't want to get into the racial implications of it. Those are secondary things. The primary thing is the great experiment going on by spirit. And if you notice, it's going to get better. It's going to get better because America, you have all these people from all over various places that are going to be coming together, that are going to produce a gene pool that's going to be a monster. And the rest of the world is going to have to say, holy shit. Let's look at something. Why were, in general now, not specifically, you don't want to misunderstand. I always say in general and not specifically. Because there's always the exception among all groups. In Africa, the Watusis were not little bitty people. They were big people. Thin, but big. You're talking 6, 7 feet. At a time when the rest of the world was 5'10", and 5'10" was a large person, big mother. If you go back and look at some of the ships during the Civil War, the average person was 5 foot 3 inches tall.
They said Abraham Lincoln wasn't really like 6 feet. He was less than 6 feet, and that he was considered really.
He was a tall person because everybody else was short. Now, that does not mean that in Europe you didn't have people who were fast. But that means generally in terms of the population, you had this. Okay? Now, you had this happen. Why? Why did the people continue to have white skin? Why did the people continue to have dark skin? Because they kept inbreeding. That means certain characteristics developed because you kept inbreeding. I don't care if the country is as big as America. Pretty soon, everybody starts to look the same. It's amazing to me that you can almost look in this country at a southern black person and a northern black person, and they look different. If you look. That is because the characteristics of the society, of the environment, dictate certain things. All right? Now, as long as people, if northern blacks keep marrying northern blacks, what are the things that's going to happen? They're going to get lighter and lighter, and their features are going to become smaller and smaller. Because one of the things in terms of the nose, the air is cold, so you have to narrow the passage so that so much of it doesn't come in. In the South or in warm countries, you will notice a wider nose because it doesn't matter so much. It's warm air. Doesn't matter so much. Okay. Before, if you notice, look at the pictures of Indians who lived on this continent and in South America. They had those big honkers.
Yeah, right.
You know, broad, big.
Yeah.
Why? Climate was okay. Can take in more of that air, and it doesn't freeze your lungs and stuff and make your heart go boom to boom to boom. Okay? Now, what you have, whether you like it or not, there are certain diseases that are peculiar to certain races. There are certain diseases black people get, the rest of the world does not get. There are certain diseases Jewish people have, the rest of the world doesn't get. There are certain diseases whites have, the rest of the world doesn't get. Why? From all the intermarrying, the genes came together, and certain recessive genes are there. You don't find many white people with sickle cell anemia. You have a few, but they come out of the area closer to Africa. Well, sickle cell was a defense against malaria. Yeah, you died at 32, but at least you didn't have malaria. You didn't die of malaria. You see? Because the circumstances call for this. You see what I'm saying? So what happens in America, over the time you've got Asians, you've got African Americans, you've got European Americans, you've got Indian Americans, you've got Mexican Americans, you've got all these people. All of a sudden, what's going to happen over time in the next hundreds of years or so, you're going to find a new man developing in America. This new man will not be subject to all these diseases because he has bred them out.
Wow.
You have a man who is capable of, you may have a 6'9" person who is capable of running 100 yards in 3.8, let's say 8.9 seconds, which is like, oh my God, because he's going to have all these other characteristics. And nature selects the better characteristics for the survival of the race being mankind. All right? So what is going to happen is that a better strain of human being is going to come out. You understand? This is how it works. And it's not according to racial guidelines. It's according to spiritual guidelines. That thing that is not white, nor black, nor red, nor yellow, nor anything. You're going to have a 7-foot guy whose color will be different. There's a proportionment to his body, even though he's 7 feet tall, who will have the hip structure of a Japanese, who can throw roundhouse kicks like nobody's business, who can run, it's going to be like, they're going to be like cars. They're going to, vroom. All right? You understand what I'm saying? This is mankind, the spirit of mankind at work, and not the foolish racial bullshit that people get into. Yes, Amita.
That's why, like, with racial marriages and offspring, in a sense, we're changing the whole, whole direction of mankind with the.
Yes, and that is what began to happen when what happened during slavery with the what you found was the masters breeding with the black women, producing offsprings, and then a breeding process took place among the offsprings to get better characteristics for a better field hand. Well, one of the things you forgot, the old master forgot, is that not only did you get a better physical specimen, you got a better specimen intellectually too. And one of the things that the myth has been that, well, it used to be, well, blacks can't play with whites because they really don't have the, all right, and then they let them play, and then they started saying, well, god damn, that son of a bitch. And then they said, well, they can play, but they can't think. And all of a sudden you started getting your Randall Cunninghams, who are a conglomeration of this 6'4", totally athletic quarterback who thinks. And you go, son of a bitch. And you say, well, but they can't do management. Well, then you got Bill Russell, who as a player and as a coach won a championship in the NBA. I think at one time you had 6 black coaches in the NBA. 4 of them had won NBA titles, and 2 of them had been into the NBA Finals. So what I'm saying is, what has been produced through that thing that started back then was something that was better than either of the 2 that they started with. But now we're beginning to say, well, Jimmy the Greek said, well, what we did was we produced a superior thing. And everybody said, you're fired. But he told the truth. No, he didn't. That's not what he said. I used the word thing.
Is that what he tried to do? I never saw it.
That's what he said. He simply told the truth. That's all.
Described our anatomy.
No, he said, what he said was true. And if you take, why is it everybody can accept it? Oh, we breed a horse to get a better horse. We breed a dog to get a better dog. We breed, well, don't you know that the same breeding process, it's biological. And man is an animal. Man is no different from any other living, breathing thing on this planet. You see what I'm trying to say here? I'm not talking about racial superiority. I'm talking about what happens when you do certain things, when you stop the inbreeding and begin to bring more things in. Shit, something happens. And this is the process that is going to increase and to go further into the American future. Thank you. Right. As you find the physical barriers having to be accepted, that's the expansion of the mind. It's like somebody said, white boys can't play basketball. Give me Larry Bird. I'll take him. You don't want him? Larry, you can play with me. Not only can Larry play with me, but Tom Chambers can play with me. A whole lot of people can play with me. You understand what I'm saying? We can't. There's a thing in the NFL. Good hands, but slow. You know what that means? He's white. That's what it means. That's what it means. But now, the same person who segregated against black people are now segregating against themselves, which is stupid. You see, that's what happens when you won't let go of a certain mentality. When you won't let go of a certain idea structure. You just change it. I'm reminded of a story that Ray Meyer told about going to Kentucky and playing in the 50s and 60s and having black players, and the black players would have to go stay at different hotels and find some black family to stay with when they were in the South and that kind of stuff. And during the time, even before then, when the black players had to be left in Chicago because they couldn't play against white players in the South. Somebody had a black team, and generally a black team, and they kind of beat the hell out of everybody in the NCAAs. And so one of the things started happening is white teams in the South began to get black players. And I think it was Adolph Rupp who had said to Ray at one point in time, he said, Ray, you know, we just cannot have black players playing for us. That's just all there is to it. And so after this happened and they started to get black players in, Ray asked him, said, well, Adolph, what happened? He said, by God, them boys are getting whiter every day. See, we can't we can't change the attitude, so I'll deny. Say, hey, you know, hey, well, we want to win. What the fuck, man? The point, again, is back to what we talked about a little earlier about justification. That's what it's about. Can't justify it. We have to deal with what's real. And when we deal with what's real, it's just what's real. You know? If you beat me, you beat me. I'll get you. I'll see you next trip. Whatever. Now, again, I want to tie this whole thing together now. What we've talked about here is something that underlies everything that seems to be of importance. The war, the people in the war, no, it's what is underneath it. Race, no, it's what's underneath it. You can bring the same thing to sex, no, it's what's underneath it. Whether male, female, whatever, it's homosexual, whatever. That's not the issue. Those are things that hang in the air. You look at the color of a person's skin, what relationship does that bear on the quality of the person? None whatsoever. And I don't care if it's black looking at white or white looking at black or both of them looking at Mexican or Puerto Rican or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. There was a story, Archie Bunker and Jefferson were fighting. They fighting like hell and they talking about each other, and Bunker has this petition going around to have this Puerto Rican family not move in next door, and Jefferson's raising hell, and the guy said, he says to Jefferson, Jefferson says, "You've got that petition and it's blah, blah, and it's blah, blah." And he said, "Well, we're trying to keep this Puerto Rican from moving in." He says, "I'll sign. Let me sign." You see, so that's what we do. Now, what we have to do is go underneath that, because that is, it's stupid. It's stupid. So it's not what appears. If you can see it, doesn't mean a whole lot. It's what's behind it. And what's behind it cannot be seen. But it can be expressed in what you see. But you have to be open to get past what you see to see what the real thing is. That is important. That's why it's important that we not just look at things from our own position of self-importance and have answers that solidify our importance. It is more important to have answers that answer the question so that we can receive a greater reward and move on. You see what I'm saying? We don't want the Archie Bunker attitude. Archie Bunker says, he said, "We're in trouble. We need a lawyer." Archie Bunker says, "Get Rabinowitz, Rabinowitz, and Rabinowitz, 7 savage Jews that'll turn you every way but loose." He don't want nothing to do with the Jews unless he's a doctor or a lawyer. That's stupid. That's stupid. See? Archie says, "We can't let those jigaboos into our club." And then finally you get this Solomon Brown, who turns out to be a black Jew. And they said, "Well, we'll get them in," and then he'd find out he's going to bring some more blacks in. He says, "Well, one thing, we'll have a hell of a basketball team." You see, so see what we're looking at. It's justification of a position. And that's absurd. It's looking at the truth. When we look at the truth, we're going to benefit much more than we are, than when we look at it and try to force it into our own general view, because the truth often is going to be sticking out around the edges because it doesn't fit into our view. So the view must be, this is the view. Now, how can I use this so that everything rises? And then everybody benefits. Everyone benefits. because that's what it's about.